let's wait for another 1 minute so we can have other people's online. More people are joining us today, so let's give them a little bit, few minutes. Okay, good. Maybe we start now. So good morning again, everyone, and welcome to today's event organized by the Global Initiative Observatory of Illicit Economies in Southeastern Europe. We are very excited to present our new report on the phenomenon of the label exploitation in the Western Balkans. My name is Fationa Meidini, and I'm the director of the Southeastern Europe Observatory, and I'm delighted to be your moderators for today's event. Label exploitation, characterized by workplace abuse for profit through unethical or illegal treatment of workers, has become, unfortunately, an increasing issue in this region. The report that we are presenting today explores the prevalence of this phenomenon and how it affects both local and foreign workers. The study arrives at a crucial moment, coinciding with a time when worsening work conditions and abuses are one of the reasons, in fact, that are pushing many youngsters from the region to leave and seek better opportunities abroad, creating so significant social and economical consequences for the region. At the same time, each country in the region is currently receiving tens of thousands of foreign workers annually, particularly in the tourism sectors of Albania and Montenegro, as well as in the industry and services sectors in countries like Serbia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and more. These workers are, in fact, among the most vulnerable one to be exploited, given the additional challenges that they have to face in a system already riddled with gaps. So there is a lot to unpack today, and without further ado, I want to introduce the authors of the study, my dear colleagues Vanja Petrovic and Sasha Georgievich. Vanja is a program manager at the Southeastern Europe Observatory and has a long experience in international development projects and research in rule of law, human rights, criminal and social justice in the Balkans and beyond. She holds an MPhil in the interdisciplinary studies of criminology, law, and society from the University of Cape Town in South Africa. My colleague Sasha Georgievich is a senior analyst at the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime. For many years, Sasha has worked as a researcher and an analyst on issues related to security and criminality in the Balkans. He's currently pursuing his PhD at the Faculty of Criminal Justice and Security in Slovenia. Just for all those participating today, I just want to let them know that at the end of this session, we are going to have 15 minutes of Q&A. So please feel free to use the Q&A function here and pose your questions, but also you are going to have the opportunity to raise your hand at the end and also voice your questions or any remark that you might have regarding the report and the larger work of the Global Initiative on this field. So, Vanja and Sasha, now the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Fationa. Good morning, everyone. And thank you for joining us today as we launch this report. So at the beginning, I would just like to briefly give you a little bit of a background on how this project actually happened and how we implemented it and how we conducted this research. Some of you might know that our Observatory for Southeastern Europe has a regional network of experts, which is a group of over 40 civil society activists, journalists, and academics with expertise and experience in working on organized crime issues. And once a year, we convene in person to discuss our initiatives, work, research that we do, but we also discuss the current and possible future trends, as well as needs. Identifying where we should put our expertise and resources on, which topics are under researched, and where civil society needs additional capacity and knowledge support. So this is where during these discussions that we identified labor exploitation as an emerging topic and very relevant one for the region in the years to come. And this was back in 2022. A few months later, we, as an observatory of illicit economies in Southeastern Europe of the Global Initiative, we collaborated with 6 civil society organizations, one in each of the Western Balkan 6. And the primary objective was to, in fact, enhance their research capabilities in understanding criminal trends, illicit markets, better enabling them to monitor labor exploitation within their respective countries, to raise awareness in their communities, and therefore build resilience of local and most affected population. So these 6 organizations, in fact, collected data for this research. They conducted over 110 interviews with different stakeholders, with academia, civil society, international organizations, also judiciary, law enforcement, local governments, media, private sector, also trade unions, focusing on trends and manifestations of labor exploitation, as well as community responses to the phenomenon. Among these interviews, 38 individuals who in fact were at risk or were exposed to labor exploitation also shared their experiences. So this is primarily a qualitative data that we are bringing here today, collected by civil society in the region. And this data provides a more, we believe, more comprehensive understanding and complements often limited official data that is provided by national authorities. However, we have to acknowledge that this data is often anecdotal, sometimes reliant on specific examples, specific perceptions of our interviewees. So despite its value, we also have to acknowledge certain limitations in making and demonstrating changes in trends or prevalence rates. But this is just a little bit of a context and the background to how we did this research and collected data. But I would just like at the beginning to thank these organizations that participated in this research. And a representative of one of the organizations is also here with us today, Katie from Flora Youth Center in Albania. But I would also like to extend and say our heartfelt thank you to all other organizations, Capital in Bosnia and Herzegovina, Center for Policy and Advocacy in Kosovo, Women's Rights Center in Montenegro, Mreža in North Macedonia, and Independent Journalists Association of Vojvodina and Serbia. Also to other organizations that to some way or another contributed to this research, especially Marija Anđelković from Astra organization from Serbia, who was one of our reviewers when we finalized this report. So this is just briefly from my side as an introduction and a little bit of a background. But now I would like to give floor to my colleague and the first author of this report, Sasha Đorđević, who will present to you the main findings. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar. So basically, maybe Almedina, you can share the screen. So my role today is basically I will guide you to this dark side of work in the Western Balkan. And as Vanya mentioned, this was a long journey, but for me personally, it was very nice reminder, because 15 years ago I started to work in civil society because of human rights and security of people, and basically this report is more about that than organized crime. So next slide. I will. Vanya explained very well about the methodology, how we actually collect the data for this report. And basically, my role is to explain like the key findings of the report, and you can download the report on the website, and there is a link in the chat box. So basically, there are 10 main findings. So one of the first finding that actually also Fatjona mentioned in the beginning in the introduction, that labor exploitation is a pressing concern for the Western Balkans. But actually, what it's a trouble for the region, but is often overlooked issue. And there are some arguments because why is that situation right now. So basically between 2018 and 2023, so authorities in the Western Balkans identified almost 800 confirmed and potential victims of labor exploitation, including forced begging. And when we actually compare the years, the spike was in 2021, and the number of cases decreased significantly in 2022, probably because of COVID. And again, in 2023, we have a surge of new cases. And when we actually see the number of cases, yet it is that Albania reported the highest number of victims and Kosovo the least. And what is also very important to highlight, that actually for these 5 years between 2018 and 2023, labor exploitation made up 46% of human trafficking cases in the Western Balkans, based on the US Department of State Trafficking in Person report data. And actually, so the numbers are high, and we have like recent allegations of labor exploitation that actually underline a growing concern in the region. The most recent case was from March 2024, when the media actually revealed that a Chinese company brought foreign workers in Serbia under exploitative contracts. Before that, we have like arrest in Montenegro because of exploitation of Turkish construction workers. We also have 2 cases in Montenegro and North Macedonia about like pushing people in to work for online scams. And one of the actually cases that actually have the highest attention, not only in media, but also in some international organizations like European Union and the United Nations, is the infamous Ling Long case about exploitation, alleged exploitation of Vietnam's workers in Serbia. So this is basically why this issue is a pressing concern for the Western Balkans. And this is not only the attitude of the civil society in the region. If we look in the law enforcement strategic assessments of organized crime, especially in Serbia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Montenegro, there is also like analysis that actually labor exploitation risk in the region will be higher in the next period. So the second main finding of this research, that the Western Balkans is a region of origin, transit, and destination for victims of labor exploitations, and actually affect both local and migrant workers. So in the previous, in the first finding, actually I talk a lot about like foreign workers, migrant workers, but actually what civil society find out, and we analyze later, that basically also local workforce is equally affected by some forms of labor exploitation in the Western Balkans. And this is usually overlooked. And there is one good quote from Kosovo worker that actually said that, I'm citing this, so we in a way unintentionally legitimize labor exploitation, and as a society we don't have enough unity to actually tackle this issue. So basically in the end this issue affect both local and foreign workforce. So what is the next finding? So basically, what are the forms of labor exploitation? So in the region, informal labor arrangements are widespread, leading to inadequate compensation, often below the legal minimum wage. This is also excessive working hours, unpaid overtime, and denial of annual leave. And another quote also from a construction worker for Bosnia and Herzegovina. He said that actually he and his colleagues on the construction side in Bosnia Herzegovina that actually work with toxic materials in sweltering conditions, like 10 hours daily, including weekends, they actually paid for 350 euros per month, and actually without that actually employer doesn't allow them legally required refreshment. So basically the quote is there is no yogurt for them. And this is also one of the key problems. We actually in the research, we also identify what sectors of economy in the Western Balkans are actually mostly affected by potential labor exploitation. And these are construction, textile, hospitality, and food industries. And so basically the research indicate that those sectors characterized by physically intense labor are most affected in the Western Balkans. One of the problem is actually that also we find out during research that this issue remains largely concealed from the public view, and there is also issue of underreporting of labor exploitation. This is very substantial problem. And in the end, when we go back to the first point, the first main finding about there is like 800 potential and confirmed victims of labor exploitation. So official data, this official data is significantly dependent upon the capacity of institutions to identify victims of exploitation, and civil society, and actually also people that we talk during research expert estimates that the true number of cases could be like 10 or even 20 times higher than official figures suggest. And this significant underreporting is partly due to victims' fear of retaliation or deportation from Serbia, but actually also a lack of awareness or trust in the authorities, in the institution to report the breach of labor rights or possibly labor exploitation. Also, this region is there are a couple of risk, basically economic factors that actually can push factors that actually can affect labor exploitation to be much more serious issue in the region. And this risk comes from the high poverty rates, youth unemployment, and informal economy. So basically, these three factors increase the risk of labor exploitation in the Western Balkans. And all through the economic parameters are better in 2023 than in 2022. All factors, basically unemployment, poverty, and informal, are below the EU average, and this is also very important to highlight. So basically, youth unemployment in the region is around 25% compared to 14% in the EU. Informal economy range from 36% in Montenegro to 76% in Kosovo, and there are basically two forms of informal employment. So this is working without a formal contract and receiving a higher or lower pay that actually is stated in the contract. So meaning that the payment is usually in cash. So we actually, in the end of the report, so when you read it, you will see that actually also we assess the impact of civil society and institutions and trade unions in fighting basically labor exploitation, and that actually we find out that it hasn't reached its full potential. So there are problems between cooperation between especially institutions and civil society, but there are some very good examples, especially in Serbia, where exploitation is not only a human rights and security issue, but because it become like more geopolitical issue. So in the end, the finding number 10 is basically there are relatively low conviction rates, and the U.S. Trafficking in reports, trafficking in person reports actually always emphasize for all countries in the Western Balkans, and all countries in the Western Balkans are in the tier 2 in the U.S. Department reports, and this means that governments in the region are not yet fully compliant with the minimum standards for combating human trafficking, but actually they are trying to make efforts, and this is value for all countries in the Western Balkans except for Serbia. Serbia was placed on the watch list in 2022, especially because I mentioned this case Linglong, and has remained under scrutiny, like higher scrutiny in 2023 and also in 2024. So basically, to conclude, in the end, so the efforts of the institution and civil society are not so fully impactful. So in the end, as I said, so basically there are human rights and security concerns, but actually establishing this direct link with between labor exploitation and organized crime is challenging. But that organized crime is evident to presence of labor exploitation all over the regions, and actually it benefits to different employers very significantly. So so also in this report we're not dealing with only analyzing what's going in the ground. We also provide some policy recommendation, and Vanya will explain more of that. Thank you for your attention, and please free to ask any of questions that you possibly have. Vanya, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Sasha. If we can just move to the next slide, please. Thank you. So Sasha has just presented the main findings, and these findings guided us in defining some policy recommendations. And these should not only help and guide policymakers, but also civil society in some aspects of their work, if we really want to effectively tackle labor exploitation. So at the very beginning, Sasha said that labor exploitation is a pressing concern, with some indications that it might even be on the rise. However, it is, as he also highlighted, often concealed, it's overlooked, and often what we found through our research, as our respondents told us, is often normalized. So to address this, efforts should be made to widely raise awareness of labor exploitation to the broader public. So victims, in fact, can identify and can know when it is happening, what rights they have, what they can do when they encounter it, what protection mechanisms are in place, and where and how to report it. And to encourage civil society, victims and witnesses to report cases to authorities and to stand up against the exploitative employers rather than just accepting it. So in this regard, awareness raising is very important. But in order to fully have impact from this raised awareness, we have to have effective legislative and policy framework that truly and fully protect workers' rights, and to have solid institutional capacities and functional and effective mechanisms in place to implement such policies. So what is key is also to improve oversight mechanisms and build capacities and resources, especially of labor inspectorates, so we can have really rigorous labor inspections. But what will encourage victims to come forward, and this is also something that Sasha touched upon, once they are aware of their rights, they have to have trust in the justice system. So often we heard that victims do not come forward because they don't trust the system. They don't think that anything will change, and that the only winners at the end are, again, just the employers that did or are still doing the wrongdoing in the first place. So this is what we heard from the victims, but what Sasha also pointed out, there are also relatively low conviction rates that also suggest that traffickers largely operate with impunity in many parts of the region. So to say no to impunity means that we need to strengthen law enforcement capacity, promote regional cooperation in this matter, to regularly also evaluate our anti-trafficking efforts to ensure that, in fact, traffickers face the consequences, and of course, to fight corruption. So corrupt practices, in fact, enable and perpetuate the exploitation of workers. Corruption undermines law enforcement and regulatory framework. It allows traffickers and exploitative employers to operate with impunity. And by addressing corruption, we can ensure that laws that are protecting workers' rights are actually enforced, that perpetrators are held accountable, and that victims receive the justice and the support they need. So strengthening transparency, accountability, and governance structures will help create this environment where simply labor exploitation is less likely to thrive. Further on, implementing a harmonized data collection and reporting systems is very important. We need to unify information from various institutions, and that is critical. This is something that we also found in our research, that there is a discrepancy in different data sets, the way countries collect data, the type of information that they collect. So policymakers should work towards creating a standardized and really comprehensive data set collection mechanisms. And this will enable us better monitoring of law and policy implementation, and that will mean that we will simply understand better the issue, which will then allow us the opportunity to shape better and more effective responses. We also heard from Sasha that despite the economic progress, the region continues to face socioeconomic challenges, characterized by high poverty rates, significant youth unemployment, and informal economy. And these are the drivers of labor exploitation and the biggest risk factor, as Sasha explained. So policymakers and the private sector, which here really has a crucial role to play, should promote economic diversification and job creation, especially for young people, and to develop policies to formalize and regulate informal economy. Inadequate social protection also leaves many vulnerable families and individuals without essential support, and that is contributing to the risk of labor exploitation. So all countries should invest in and reform social protection programs to provide, in fact, targeted support to the most vulnerable families and individuals. Further on, enhancing victim support mechanisms is crucial. We need to ensure the recovery and reintegration of victims into society. And effective support services such as legal assistance, psychosocial counseling, safe housing, for example, all of that empowers victims to escape the cycle of exploitation and to rebuild their lives. So strengthening these mechanisms can be achieved by increasing funding, for example, for victim support programs, training law enforcement and social workers as well, so they're able to better identify and assist victims, and fostering collaboration between government agencies, civil society, and international organizations to provide comprehensive care and protection to victims. And finally, to improve cooperation and information sharing. And this refers to both international and regional level cooperation, especially in relation to law enforcement and prosecution, for example, but also nationally. Sasha also mentioned this. It is key to improve collaboration between public, private sector, and civil society. Policymakers should endorse and support civil society efforts. also promote media collaboration in order to increase awareness and empower, for example, trade unions to work towards championing labor rights and to challenge exploitative employers. And also within civil society itself, civil society should continue collaborating among each other, also with journalists, with trade unions, to really address labor rights violations and to improve workers' knowledge of labor rights, while also encouraging this information sharing and also participation in coordinated initiatives, which are always more effective. So in short, these are the key 10 recommendations. And as you can see and hear, they in fact feed into each other. They're very interconnected. So I would like to just stop here, as I'm sure everyone is also eager to hear other speakers and some experiences from the ground. As Sasha mentioned, we are happy to, looking forward to your questions and comments, and we will have more time towards the end to discuss more details. Thank you. Tatiana?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Vanya and Sasha, for your presentation and the work you have done. Congratulations again on the report, and I really hope that our colleagues across the region will find it useful. In fact, we are already getting some questions in the chat, so it's quite exciting, and it seems that there is a large interest on this issue. That in fact it has been also underreported. As my colleague said, in the making of this report, we were assisted by 6 civil society organization representatives from across Western Balkans who collected data and conducted interviews in the field. One of them is Ms. Alketa Lamani, the director of the Vlora Youth Center in Albania. She will share with us her experience working in the field for this report, including some of the challenges, especially during a time when Albania is facing a large number of seasonal workers, both locals and foreigners, as it tries to sustain its growing tourism sector. So, Ms. Lamani, over to you.
Hi, Tatiana. Nice to have you here in this webinar. I start to think about these topics when we have the possibility to work in this study. It's a personal experience, but not only. Our organization have have gained a lot of experience based in the work done by GI partners and our colleagues in Western Balkans for this study. Our study in Albanian situation presents a snapshot of situation of labor exploitation of young people in the tourism sector. Identified as a sector with high potential for development, the tourism sector is one of the main sector who it's accompanied by crisis of labor sector, where Albanian young people have been offering their first work experience for the years. The report presents the situation regarding labor exploitation in this sector, and through analyze, they show the push and the pull factor that force young people who it's not are contributing in Albania but are emigrating, compared with the pull factor for the employees or foreign migrants who come to Albania to work for the short period with the ultimate goal to emigrate in UAE or UK. During our work, we visit different touristic structure in the Albania Riviera. And initially we start our study with the topics to find foreign employers in the tourism sector and to have their comments or their perspective. But in the end, during the study, they living in a closed structure, and we don't have the possibility to communicate with them. For this reason, we find different young people between 13 and 22 years who are working together with foreign employers in this structure. We start our study to interview different young people, and we find a dramatic situation where people who are working in this structure show us. We interview around 16 young people who, for us, are the victims of labor exploitation. Analyzing their situation, we try to understand not only their situation, but the exploitation situation of foreign workers, not only for the Albanian, but also the foreign workers, because they work together in the same situation, but we don't have the possibility to speak. In this interview, we verify the violation of labor laws, the labor codes who restrict the minimum working wage age. It's 16, but mostly we find a lot of people 13 years, 16 years who work in this structure. Many workplaces employ young people aged from 13 to 16 years old. We find lack of formal employment contracts. None of these workers had a formal employment contract, first because the law don't permit, because they are under the age to work. And the second, they mostly the employee or the employer don't have the information how to do this contract or how to work in the formal way. Usually for the employer, they have one economist or one people who prepare the documents in the office, but nobody have the possibility to have one working contract or to sign one document. Usually, all the people who work in the touristic structure have a daily wage of 10 euros per day without tax payments or without other service like social or payments. We find poor working situation, dramatic situation for the poor working condition. Workers are working under from 10 to 12 hours per day. Mainly of these workers come from other cities, and the owners provide them food and accommodation, which typically consists one shared room with 4 or 5 people, and often they have a bad living condition. In some cases, we collect facts where the young people working in this structure sleep under the umbrellas of these structures. We find different findings. We have many of our interview reported psychological or physical abuse. One of them report one case of sexual abuse. Also, the workers did not receive treatment when they are sick, where or they are not paid when they are not paid during the day off, and the work environment it's they have a minimum of safety standards. Okay, we have find a lot of low wage because they are unskilled workers in the tourism sector. Primarily, the wage they reported monthly earnings of around 300 euro per day. Payments are made in cash in 2 installments. One on the first month of employment, and the other part is the end of the season of the touristic season. Also, we find a lot of problems where these problems it's not these problems are the when we speak with this person, with people who are interviewed by us, they told us this is the last season when I'm working in Albania, because for me it's better to go in other states and to work. And for this reason, we verify the large number in this period where Albanian young people going with small boats in UK or in Europe. The same situation is for the migrant workers who they represent the same problems as young people who work in the same structure, but usually they work for 3 or 6 months, and after this, their ultimate goal is to emigrate in UK or other European countries. Many of employees have a lot of problems to report in the public institution the foreign workers who are going, and in our opinion, this situation probably the people who come in to work in Albania in the tourism sector have the ultimate goal to leave the country or to go and to emigrate, usually to go in Greece, in Montenegro, or in Italy. This is some of our findings, and we give some more space the question or other recommendation from the panelists or from the participants.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ms. Lamani, for sharing your experience in the field, and also for the invaluable help in putting together this report. Thanks a lot. Today, we are also pleased to have with us Ms. Snežana Trajanovska. Ms. Trajanovska is the director of the Migration, Asylum, Refugees Regional Initiative, commonly known as MARI. MARI has been established, in fact, years ago, and has a mandate to assist the governments of the Western Balkans in developing strategies in the area of asylum, migration, and more. issues that are interconnected with labor exploitation. So Ms. Trajanovska, first, welcome. And my question to you is going to be what MARI approach is to this phenomenon and what contribution you can give on this issue.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Fatjona. Thank you to all of your team. At the beginning, allow me to extend my thank you for including MARI in this webinar and also for inviting me to participate. I would like also at the beginning to congratulate to Vanya and Sasha for this very well prepared report related to this specific, very actual but also sensitive issue. The report is excellent base, not only for private and NGO sector, but according to my opinion, it is also a very good base for governmental authorities and all decision makers. We in MARI recognize this phenomena, and according to the relevant researches from different resources, we started one specific project dedicated to the issues actually closely related to this topic, the topic of your research, but from one a little bit different perspective. So I would like briefly to inform you about our actual activities in this regard, and our dedication to suppress the illegal work and how to say, some kind of criminalization of this situation and work when we are speaking about migrants, but also local personnel and also asylum seekers. So MARI is currently working on a project with GIZ called Fostering Economic Opportunities of the MARI Participants Administrations by enhancing the system for international protection. The aim of this project is to enhance the mechanisms and capacities of governmental institutions and ensure better conditions for the social and labor participation of asylum seekers in the 6 MARI participants. Actually, your research and our mandate for these 6 countries, in our case we call them administrations, are the same region. The project builds upon existing regional mechanisms, promoting better collaboration and coordination for the integration and deployment of asylum seekers and people on the move, while reducing the shortage of skilled workforce in the MARI region. The essential for the opportunity legally to work in the MARI region, it is the equal as the Western Balkan region, is the legal status that grants them right to be part of the legal labor market in each of our administrations. For instance, people with granted international and humanitarian protect have immediate access to the labor market, but people which applied for international protection and their procedure for approval is still pending can have access to labor market after 6 or 9 months from the application date. On the other hand, irregular migrants, due to their illegal entry in the MARI participants in the region, cannot access the labor market. However, many of the asylum seekers and irregular migrants, regardless that legally doesn't have right to work, are part of so-called gray economy, illegal economy, and work without to officially register. This is also a serious risk and push factor for labor exploitation and many other types of human trafficking. Economic integration allows people on the move to contribute their skills, knowledge, and work ethic to the labor markets in the region. This approach not only presents a humanitarian solution for displaced individuals, but also offers numerous benefits for the host administrations. I would like to mention here that we are now at the very beginning of this project, which will end by the end of this year. It is only 6 months project. And we plan to have one big conference and 2 small follow-ups like workshops or meetings with small character to cover this issue. I would also like to share with you some of the findings on our research, which shows that, for example, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, there are decreasing and aging of population, low activity and employment rates, and high unemployment rates, particularly for women, the youth, and those with low educational levels. There is also significant levels of labor market informality, mainly in construction, hospitality, and small enterprises. The other example is Serbia, where also is decreasing and aging population, low fertility and high emigration rates, and relatively low rates of activity and labor market shortage. However, Serbia's employment and unemployment rates are among the highest or lowest in the Western Balkan regions. It is very, with some kind of oscillation, and important economic activity recorded since 2019. Also, there is a significant levels of labor market informality, about 30%, and it is a higher proportion of women in this sector and those in the agriculture sector. Also, I would like to add here that the youth are a vulnerable population in terms of labor market inactivity. According to our findings, the Western Balkan region has been known as an emigration region. It also faces challenges due to labor market distortions and skill shortages. Since 2015, there has also been an increase in the number of people on the move that have been transiting through, or in some cases, taking residence in the Western Balkans region. I would like also to add here that most of the migration flows into the region are best categorized as mixed migration flows, forced, irregular, etc. And therefore, we would like to use this phenomena and this this data to help the region and relevant institutions to suppress the exploitation and to better use the workers or possible workers while they are legally in our region. I would also like to share with you that main migration reasons, according to some research, are economic, war, and conflicts. It is also good to know that the registration of arrivals increased dramatically until 2022 and then decreased. But there are specific dynamics in each participants, each of our administration. The registration may increase in one participant, but also decrease in another participants in the same year or maybe in the same period. About the intended stay, it is also good to know that most of them express interest to stay in the region or to apply for asylum, but most keep onward trajectories or just their final destination is not our region. Most indicate are France, Germany, and Italy as intended destination countries. High mobility patterns is or can be described as average stay days less than a month, and most recently less than a week. In this context, I would like to conclude that investing in the economic integration of the people on the move is an opportunity for our region, as well as for our MARI participants, to demonstrate their commitment to a prosperous and humanitarian, but also harmonization of future for all of us, including migrants, including asylum seekers, and the local people. Furthermore, if asylum seekers and other categories of people on the move can legally, in accordance with the legislation in the region, in the administrations of the region, be part of their labor markets, the number of possible labor and sexual also exploitation, as well as trafficking and a lot of other things, abuses and human trafficking will be significantly reduces, as well as exploitation. So thank you for your attention. It will be briefly about our findings and our activities in this domain. Thank you once again.
Thanks a lot, Ms. Trajanovska, for your inputs on the issue and also sharing some of your research with us. And we really hope that we will continue our collaboration on the issue of the label exploitation, but also on other issues of common interest. Thanks again for your presence here.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you.
Today, we also have the pleasure to have here with us our colleague, Livia Wagner. Livia is a network coordinator of the Global Initiative and also a thematic lead on the issue of the human trafficking. Welcome, Livia. We are going to have two short Q&A together, and without further ado, I just want to pose the first question to you. So why do you think that this report on labor exploitation is important? And how does it enhance our understanding on trends at the European, but also global level?
Thanks very much, Fatjona, and thank you everyone in the team. Congratulations on this report. And just to also dive right into the first question, why this is important. It's very simple. Labor trafficking keeps to be underreported. So we know in the human trafficking sphere, like I see there are many colleagues from other anti-human trafficking organizations. We know that there is a lot of attention given to, for very good reasons, to the sexual exploitation, to many other forms of exploitation. But in cases of labor trafficking, we know that there is not enough data, and the responses remain also uncoordinated. So we know that it's important to add more data on that, and reports like that, they contribute to that area. So what is also important to say is that we have heard also from my previous speakers that, of course, labor trafficking very often operates and is fueled by, for instance, conflict or like external shocks. But even without these situations, we know that labor trafficking is very often happening in low-wage industries. We're talking about low-skilled migrant workers. And of course, where there is a lack of legal protection and migrant workers keep to be like isolated. This also has been reflected in like major trafficking in persons reports, like the last one from UNODC from 2022, where for the first time it was mentioned that it's a growing trend and it's at an alarming pace. And I think that is something that we have to put a lot of attention to, because we know that there are like deceptive recruitment practices, but it's also very difficult to respond to that because we don't have enough data, we don't have enough investigations on that. And at the same time, what is important, like for now on a country level, is that we don't have like proper reporting mechanisms. As soon as we have the data and to say like, okay, these are the cases, then we can also coordinate and have like coordinated response mechanisms. But the more important thing is like, we have to create the databases for that. I think what also is one of the like the comparisons in terms of like the European level is the global level is that unfortunately the law enforcement responses are not adequate. So, and this is something that is across the world, like of course, like at different levels, but we have these issues, like for instance, in Europe, Africa, Asia, Latin America. And very often when we're talking about migrant workers, they're not just in working or like migrating in the regions, but sometimes we have like transcontinental migration flows. So we're talking about migrant workers, they don't speak the language, they are from a completely different cultural background. And what of course is important also is that sometimes the investigations from the law enforcement, they are hampered because of, for instance, limited resources, insufficient training, cultural and language barriers. But also there are the difficulties from law enforcement to act upon these cases because of some bureaucratic issues and because of such a general lack of awareness of the specific issue. So for instance, I was talking to labor inspectors, and they were saying that in a city, they had, for all the construction sites, they had 2 labor inspectors. And the number of the construction sites was 1,000. So 2 labor inspectors, they were in charge of overviewing 1,000 construction sites in a European city. Obviously, we're talking here about the issue of the vulnerability of migrant workers being exploited, labor right violations. So I think that is, of course, from law enforcement and from other governmental institutions, there has to be more focus on that risk of exploitation. Yeah, I'll stop here for the first answer, for the first question.
Yeah, and I have another question for you. How do you think that this report findings compare with the global labor exploitation trends? What are some of the similarities that you see, but also differences?
I think what is very easy to say, and what has also been mentioned by my previous speakers, is like the external shocks. So now we're in a phase of like a polycrisis, as we call it. So we're having environmental crises, we're having like political crises, we're having a pandemic, or we had a pandemic. So I think these external shocks, they fuel the vulnerable situation of these migrant workers. And I think what is very important to say, without repeating what has been said already, is that migrant workers are already in a very vulnerable situation, but like these external shocks, they add to that. And especially because of these issues, we have to have like this coordinated response between law enforcement, civil society, victim assistance organizations, and international organizations that are present in these countries. I would say another similarity is that there is a connection between labor trafficking, or there is like an interconnection between labor trafficking and child labor. And I think that is something that we can find in so many countries. Also, like we have been doing research in the Western Balkans, 6 countries, on labor exploitation and sexual exploitation in the travel and tourism industry. And this is something that happens like in so many countries. And I think what is here also to see is that there are like similar factors to that. And what we see is that we have like the mutual system of exploitation that we have in these two phenomena of labor exploitation and child labor. But of course, we're talking about the overlap in the sector. So we're talking about industries that are very vulnerable to exploitation. We're talking about the informal sector. Informal sector is very difficult for labor inspectors to add to. Sometimes we're talking about like remote areas, for instance, when it's about mining, logging. And in all these areas, of course, there is this interconnectedness where labor exploitation and child trafficking happens at the same time. And that also then links to the interlinkages of the supply chain. So that means in many cases, these issues happen then in the same supply chain. And of course, when we're talking about the regulative frameworks, this is also when it's difficult to protect or prevent labor trafficking. Obviously, then it's also very difficult to prevent child labor. And what I think is also important, because we at the Global Initiative, we're looking at the ecosystem of crime. And sometimes in human trafficking, we don't fully look at the mapping of the actors. So we see human trafficking, but we don't look enough at the other forms of crime that are happening in this ecosystem of crime. So human trafficking is very often linked to other forms of organized crime. And I think that is something that we also have to understand when looking at the actors. Who are they? With whom are they collaborating? Is like, who are they sharing the networks to? And I think that is very important also when addressing and thinking about law enforcement responses. I will just briefly talk about the differences, and then I will stop because I want to leave some time for Q&A. I think the differences we can see here in the role of employment agencies. So migrant workers, or the issue of exploitation, labor trafficking, is very often linked to migrant workers, and by that very often linked to also the role of employment agencies. It doesn't mean that employment agencies are always involved, but we have seen that employment agencies, they have this dual role. They can have, or very often they have, this legitimate role that they are in a formal sector, and they are basically facilitating or like connecting the employer and a person who is looking for a job. But very often we have also seen that labor trafficking is facilitated by fraudulent or illicit employment agencies. So we're talking about fraudulent recruitment practices. That means people have to pay inflated costs for transportation, inflated costs for accommodation, but also the collusion with the exploiters. So we have, for instance, been doing examples. We have been doing research in the agricultural sector and labor trafficking in Mexico. And there we have been seeing how the workers were being exploited like for a couple of weeks and months. And the costs were so high, and we have seen the receipts, the costs were so high that at the end of the month, there was $1.50 that was being paid to that worker. And why? Because these recruiters that were part of like an employment agency, they were very much aware of what was going on. And we have the same also the cases of domestic employment agencies for domestic workers in Peru, where, yeah, there's not always being checked. And of course, there also like the informal sector, it's very difficult to do like the right due diligence. A good example, and I want to end with a hopeful, let's say, with a good example, is that, for instance, countries like the Philippines, they have been very often or like for many years being confronted with exploitation of their own migrant workers. So now they are heavily investing in the issue of, they have like their own ministry that is looking at the prevention of labor exploitation of their migrant workers. And they have recruitment agencies, Fair Work. So there is like a system that tries to understand how to prevent that exploitation is happening even before the migrant workers leave their country. Yeah, so I'll end here, but I'm very happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, thank you very much, Livia. Very interesting. I think one of the comparative advantage of the global initiative is, in fact, that we are seeing the issues that we are discussing in this region also in other parts of the world. And of course, there's always something to learn about. And also many things are also similar. And the issue of fraudulent companies is also something that is also present in this region as well. So thanks again. I see that we have many questions and interest, and the questions are increasing, so we might get a little bit more time in order to try to reply them. I'm trying to do a grouping of the questions and address those to the colleagues that I think that they can reply to those better. I'll start with Vanya. So Vanya, we have a question from Gracie Gashi that's in fact about the policy recommendations and what, in your opinion, is one of the most urgent to be taken in consideration. Also, Vanya, I also want to ask you to address the question that comes from Susan Hoff about organizations that we have worked. I know that we have worked with Astra, but also what is your view and also how we expanded the collaboration besides those 6 organizations that we choose to contribute. Vanya, over to you.
Thank you, and thank you for our audience for posing these questions and many others that I can see in the Q&A box. That means that yeah, we have a very lively discussion and a lot of interest. So to answer the first question, but I must say it is really a tough one. So how to prioritize these policy recommendations, and it's a really, really tough one. I did mention when I presented the recommendations that often that they're indeed interconnected. If we tackle one, we cannot really fully tackle it without, for example, tackling corruption, which is enabler, just to give an example. So it is really really difficult to pinpoint at one or two specific ones. And what we also have to consider, the structural problems that exist, some of the economic vulnerabilities, as if we look at the risk factors. So obviously, if the risks as exist and they're overwhelming, you know, how we then shape our immediate responses. We also have to think what are the feasible and possible like short-term results that we are maybe aiming to see, and what are the long-term results. So in the short term, given the structural problems that we have and that we know that cannot be simply resolved easily, and that it would take time, I think, and of course, to implement any of these recommendations, we need some resources. We have to put some additional resources. And I think oversight mechanisms are really key, at least to kind of be able to identify. Olivia mentioned like how under-resourced inspectorates, labor inspectorates are. So how can we identify cases if we don't have oversight, right? So maybe that would be some kind of short-term like somewhere where you can, if we invest resources, maybe we could see some results. But then again, we have to also tackle some structural and bigger issues like corruption, because if we have corrupt officials, labor inspectors and stuff, then it will undermine all these efforts. So it is indeed very tricky to kind of just highlight one. But maybe if I have to kind of identify, it would probably be focused on the oversight mechanism and strengthening then accountability, making sure that those who are wrongdoing, that they are held accountable. Livia, would you agree? And would you like to add?
Yeah, as you were saying, I totally agree that it's very difficult to pinpoint on one or two. What I think what has to start is that there is a true collaboration between the different actors, because we know also from the region that sometimes there is mistrust between law enforcement agencies and civil society, although we're all trying to achieve the same. And I think that is something that can, and we have been working with so many different actors. And I think on a personal level, and there are like people on the call that I've for many, many years, on a personal level, this works. But and as soon as this person leaves, then the problem starts, because then there is no trust, and this is crucial for the collaboration, and only that. So I think this is important to have this cross-sectoral cooperation.
And together we are stronger. So this is how we can also leverage resources and make sure that we are more effective if we work together. Thank you. And just briefly, because we have many questions, just to touch upon the next question on who participated in the research. So I did say at the beginning when I explained the methodology that we had key 6 organizations that helped us collect data in each of the country in the field, but they collected it by having respondents from different organizations, from different stakeholder groups, including state actors, private actors, and of course other NGOs and some international actors. And we had over 110, I believe 111 interviews in total. So some of these organizations were contributed by giving their answers, their perceptions, their opinions on the problem, and sharing their views on the topic. We also relied on some of the research previously done by Mari, for example. We did contacted Astra and had discussions with them to make sure that also to kind of also verify our findings and to take their contributions to kind of complement and put them in a larger perspective. So indeed, a lot of organizations, a lot of civil society actors, but also from the public sector and private sector were involved in this research. I hope this answers the two questions addressed to me.
Thanks, Vanya. I'm just going now to pass the floor very quickly, in fact, to our coordinator in Kosovo, Dardan Kochani, because we have one questions that come from Andras Ivan Orban about the guest workers in downtown Pristina. So maybe Dardan has more insights about the legal status and the problems or challenges that they are facing. Claudio, could we have Dardan speaking?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very well.
Okay, so regarding the workers in Kosovo, I believe that majority of them that Andras mentioned are from Bangladesh, because in the last 3 years, we have an increased number of workers from Bangladesh who come in Kosovo, but majority of them, they don't stay. So they use Kosovo only as a transit to go to Western Europe countries. So they come legally through all procedures, but then they are either part of networks, or they pay for these services to legal companies to bring them in Kosovo and leave, or they simply abuse with a resident permits and leave towards the Western Europe, because it is not the same number, for example, as first-time applicants of resident permits and then renewal of those resident permits. So there is some discrepancy among these statistics, which shows that they don't stay actually in Kosovo, because I don't believe that they come here, they stay 1 year and then they return. But I believe that they come here, they stay only for a few months, and then they leave towards other countries.
Okay. Thank you, Dardan, for the insight that you brought from Kosovo. Now I'm going to hand over to my colleague Sasha. In fact, there are several questions for you, Sasha. So you have a question from Jimmy Perumadan on the forced criminality that you mentioned, and if you can elaborate a little bit more on that. And then you have several questions by our colleague Ugis Vekic, and the most important one is the identification of the link with crime in these cases. And then you have Wen Grant about some measures that the EU bodies, in fact, are taking in this direction, and the question that are those going to be effective enough in order to curb the issues that we are seeing right now. And we have Yasmina Krunic from Astra, in fact, an organization that we collaborated in filing and putting together this report. And there's always this question of the Chinese migrants in Serbia that pops up, and their status. So, Sasha, a lot on your plate, but just be considerable of the time, and not to extend more than 10 or other 5 minutes. Thanks a lot.
Well, thank you, Tatiana. Thank you, our colleagues, to actually pose so many questions. So I think this is quite a good signal that we need to continue work on this. So I will start very briefly. So first question is about forced criminality. So basically, in 2021 and 22, so citizens of Taiwan were engaged in fraud operation in North Macedonia and Montenegro. And basically, they were coerced into making fraudulent calls in China, falsely informing them on fictitious fines. And basically, this case is very good because it shows like good practice in law enforcement action. And in the report, you can find out the photo of house that actually people were calling other people because of these fictitious fines. And actually, because of this case, for example, Montenegro and Taiwan have like some kind of agreement on law enforcement cooperation, and in the end, the Taiwan prosecution actually indictment like I think more than 40 persons, and that's why we actually mention in our recommendation that cooperation, law enforcement cooperation, so between prosecutor, police officers is very important, because right now we see that actually labor exploitation doesn't have any as other forms of crime doesn't have like a border. So this case is very good example. I'm not sure what happened in the end about what happened in the court in Taiwan, but actually we can also find out about that. So the questions from Ugi. So Ugi, actually, this is
Sorry,
like
sorry to interrupt. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sasha, sorry to interrupt. So we have Yasmina, in fact, from Astra that has raised her hand. Maybe just to complement something.
So,
for a few minutes before we carry on with answering
Okay.
other questions. Yasmina, can you hear us? Yes.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you for letting me say something. First of all, thank you for the report. We are always very happy to be able to look at the regional trends. And thank you, Sasha, for mentioning Astra several times. We are going to take a careful look at the report, because we are now preparing several policy briefs and brief analysis on the situation of Serbia. I was just going to say that my question was related not to China's migrants, but to your impression as the persons who were able to observe the regional trends. Do you see anywhere in other regional countries that you analyzed the trend that is present in Serbia, which is strengthening the relations with China, state agreements between Serbia and China, and the obvious practice of letting Chinese companies off the hook even when the labor exploitation and labor exploitation for trafficking is present? So do you see anywhere else such influence? Because we believe it is very important, and it trespasses every trafficking is the more narrow topic, but this is like a high political question. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
So Yasina, thank you for your question. So short answer is no. So basically, like those links with Chinese owned companies, there are not so like strong links with other countries in the Western Balkans. But I think one of the reasons is because Serbia have most developed relationships with China than other countries in the regions, and especially because of I don't know, visits of the Chinese president in the last couple of years for 2 times, like I don't know, more than 30 agreements between China and Serbia. But so far, I also looked, because also like some other investment of China in other countries, and there are some links or like media reporting about labor exploitation of foreign or domestic workers, but actually no such links except in Serbia.
Thanks, Sasha. I think that you can carry on right now with the other
Okay.
questions.
Yeah, so question from Ugi Zvekic. So I think this is basically an idea for a new research. And I remember also Livia have like, when she reviewed the report, she also have like similar questions. But actually, there is lack of data, and this is actually the maximum we can do with this data that we actually have access. And sometimes it's very difficult to compare. Actually, we actually wanted to have like a regional approach, not to have like a national focus on one country. But actually, we actually find out in the report, I think this is also linked with your question, Ugi, that some forms of labor exploitation are not concerned only with the private sector. It's also like very visible in the public sector. And this is actually that some civil society from the field were actually emphasized in their reporting. So it's not only like the private sector, the question is about also the public sector. So other questions I don't have like answer. So this is like this is basically a new research.
And Sasha, also we have a question about the new question. Sorry, just 1 second, because questions keep coming. So are there organizations in Europe checking the balance to this labor exploitation? I'm not quite sure if we understand the question, but I believe about overseeing institutions in Europe.
So basically, there are like many agencies on the European Union level, but I think like the first line of defense are basically labor inspectorates. Like Livia mentioned, like they have like two labor inspectors to cover like 1,000 construction sites, but basically they are on and in this research we actually also find out that construction is mostly risk for labor exploitation. So I think there are, especially in the European Commission, in the EU Home and Migration Affairs, there are like people and agencies, and also we mentioned La Strada, like civil society organization, like network of civil society organization that actually also cover. But actually, I don't know about any like specialized organization in the region, but also in Europe, that actually tackle only labor exploitation issues. So most of organizations are dealing with human trafficking or dealing with labor, with human rights, and specifically with labor rights. For example, in Serbia, the good example is A11 initiatives that actually covers labor and social rights of marginal and vulnerable groups. So there are organizations, but actually I don't know about like any specific that actually covers only labor exploitation. So this is answer.
Yeah, maybe I give the floor to Livia. Livia, if you have something to contribute about the role of the EU bodies in this issue.
Yes, there are EU institutions looking especially at the role of labor inspectors coordinated from the EU body. But at the end, how it is being implemented, of course, depends on the actual country and the legal frameworks that are adopted by the country. So again, it's here like there are coordinated efforts from regional bodies, but how it trickles down, that always remains the challenge.
And also we have a follow-up here saying that European Labour Authority is uniting the labor inspectorates of the EU countries, and also have subgroups on labor exploitation, etc. So yeah, I think that it's quite good, and I like the fact that a lot of information are coming and also complementing, because as it was said, this is an underreported issue, and I think that we need to speak more about it. I have also some reaction from Alketa Lamani regarding the questions that was posed about contacting La Strada and Vatra, and I was told that they have been contacted, but so they see the exploitation in the work mainly as sexual trafficking. So their focus is more on sexual trafficking rather than labor exploitation, which is something that is larger. So this is just something to be taken in consideration. Do we have some other pressing questions, or maybe some final remarks from both Sasha and Vanya?
I would just like to thank everyone for participating. I'm very happy to see such a fruitful discussions, and just to reinforce what you just said, we have to speak more about the issue. And I'm also inviting the audience and all the organizations and institutions that joined us today and beyond to be in touch and to include us and to keep this discussions alive and ongoing.
Sasha, last word.
So thank you for your participation. Very good question. And in the end, just like, please download the report, read. If you have any feedback, good or bad, it's good to receive any feedback in the end. So that actually we actually heard something about impact of our report. So thanks.
Thank you, Sasha. Thank you, Vanya. Thank you to everyone. I want also to thank the panelists. I want to thank the 6 civil society organizations that contributed to this report that we had here today, Katie, but also Yasmina on the call. I want to thank a lot Ms. Snezhana Trajovska. Thank you for participating in these discussions. And I think that the real value of discussion of this nature is of bringing together not only the civil society, but also intergovernmental bodies like MARI. And I think that being together, it's better, and we could like really push forward for changes and more awareness in this field. I also want to thank Livia for her presence. Thank you very much for your guidance and presence in this issue and the larger human trafficking issue as well. I want to thank Claudio for his great work in making this webinar possible, which is not easy, in fact. But most importantly, I want to thank all the attendees. Thank you very much for participating first. Thank you for being active with your questions. Please, as my colleague said, give feedback about the report and get in touch. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.